What's poppin', homies? It's your favorite homegirl, Gossip Girl here, and today I want to talk to you about a serious situation. I was reading this article in the New York Times, and it's about this guy named Victor Rivera. Now, Victor Rivera is a guy who is he's head of one of the most largest homeless shelter operations in New York, and has been accused of assault and harassment by at least 10 women. Okay, and what grabbed my attention was the title that they used in the New York Times. Nobody tells daddy no. And I'm like, hold on, wait a minute. What is this all about? And I became disgusted when I started reading it, because it's like, come on, you're going to use your power and your leverage at the suffering of someone else. You know these women need a place to stay. You know they're trying to get into their own. And in order for you to help them, you're making advances towards them and all kind of stuff. Like, what's good? What's going on with that? And let me tell you something. I've heard so many horror stories about women in the shelter system. I used to live in the shelter system, okay? I was at Jackson Family Center in the Bronx. Now, some of you who listen to me may know where it is, and this was years ago. And thank goodness, nothing like this ever happened to me. But I've heard some stories. So let's get right on into it. Victor Rivera gained power and profit as New York's homeless crisis worsened. Accused of assault and financial misconduct, he has largely escaped consequences. At first, the offer seemed generous, Miss Erica Scholar said. Okay, and she was in one of the homeless shelters and needed a more stable place to live. Victor Rivera, who oversaw a network of shelters, including the one where she was staying, said he had a solution for her. A spare apartment for her at his home in the Bronx. But after Miss Scholar moved in, she had realized that Mr. Rivera, whose nonprofit organization is one of the largest operators of homeless shelters in New York, had other intentions. In December of 2016, he asked to see her leaking ceiling in her bedroom, then turned off the lights, pushed her against the wall, and began to fondle her. According to Miss Scholar and two other friends that she confided in, he demanded she give him, the ungodly exchange. He wanted her to go bobbing for apples. Now, y'all got to read between the lines, because I can't be saying all types of stuff on my channel, but y'all got to read between the lines. He wanted her to go bobbing for apples, okay? And suggested that if she refused, he would evict her, okay? So as desperate as she was to hold on to her apartment, she had no choice but to comply. Miss Scholar is one of 10 women who said they had endured assault or unwanted attention from Mr. Rivera. The New York Times found, even as some women have sounded warnings about him, including two who were given payments by his organization that ensued their silence, his power and influence had only grown during New York City's worst homeless crisis in the decades. So you mean to tell me the organization paid some women off to keep their silence, to be quiet? So you mean to tell me what they endured, you didn't care? As long as he kept his position and you paid off. So you guys in his organization enable him to do more and to keep going. Like, I don't understand. His organization, the Bronx Parent Housing Network, has received more than $274 million from the city to run homeless shelters and provide services just since 2017. The pandemic had intensified Mr. Rivera's importance. As the coronavirus swept through the homeless population, the city gave his group $10 million to provide rooms to those who were affected, and so that people could isolate and recover. Women reported Mr. Rivera's behavior at a state agency, a city hotline, and in one instance, the police, but he maintained his perch atop the organization. One employee of the Bronx Parent Housing Network said that Mr. Rivera, the chief executive, forced her to give him ungodly service, meaning he forced her to go bobbing for apples in 2016 and then fired her, according to police records, interviews, and other documents. In 2018, another employee accused Mr. Rivera of groping her and whispering, you know, unwanted comments in her ear. After both women separately complained to a state human rights agency, the Bronx Parent Housing Network paid them a total of $175,000 in settlements that they prohibit them from speaking publicly about their allegations, according to interviews and records reviewed by the Times. Right there is evidence, because if you're not doing anything, why is your organization trying to cover for you? So they paid two women totaling $175,000 to keep them quiet. 5 of the women living in Mr. Rivera's homeless shelters or had recently left, and when Mr. Rivera approached them for sex, they said, "He's got a lot of power over a lot of vulnerable girls," said Ms. Scholar, who's 49 years old, on Thursday after the Times asked the Bronx Parent Housing Network about the accusations of the misconduct. The organization put him on leave and at the city's direction moved to hire an independent investigator to examine the allegations. Mr. Rivera, who's 60 years old, declined to answer any specific questions, but issued a statement denying wrongdoing. "I have always treated women I work with at BPHN with dignity and respect. These allegations are unfair, baseless, and without merit," Mr. Rivera said in a statement. He said he was confident that the investigation would clear him and look forward to returning to work. It was a rare moment of reckoning for Mr. Rivera after a decade of acting with near impunity. The Times had found more than 78,000 people in New York City are homeless, a number that has risen to record highs in the recent years and threatens to grow as the city suffers the full economic fallout from the pandemic. New York City is under an unusual and long-standing court order to provide temporary shelter to every homeless person, and it relies on dozens of nonprofit groups like the BPHN to manage shelters and help people secure permanent housing. Last year alone, the city awarded more than $2.1 billion to these groups. Wow. The allegations against Mr. Rivera, which have not been previously disclosed, show the extent to which shelters providers can avoid meaningful repercussions. As the city's housing crisis worsened and his organizations flourished, Mr. Rivera treated the nonprofit less as a charity and more as his personal empire. He has given jobs to family members, He entangled his for-profit business with his nonprofit, awarding contracts to close associates and enjoyed new trappings of wealth. He drove a Mercedes-Benz leased by his organization and bought a home with a heated pool north of New York City and another house in the Poconos. He walks about as if he's untouchable, said Vanessa Anderson, a former payroll accountant who left the nonprofit in 2018, and said Mr. Rivera had said inappropriate things to her. This man needs to be stopped. This man needs to be stopped. He really needs to be stopped. Now, to piece the story together, Mr. Rivera, the Times interviewed more than 50 current and former employees and more than a dozen women who lived in shelters by the Bronx Parent Housing Network and examined hundreds of pages of contracts, confidential settlements agreements, lawsuits, tax records, internal financial documents from the organization. The Department of Social Services said it had made repeated efforts to keep the management of the Bronx Parent Housing Network on the straight and narrow, but it generally tried to avoid ending contracts with shelter providers. Mr. Rivera also said, I have never wanted anything more than to give back to the city and help the many people who need it. Mr. Rivera also said, because I was once one of those people. Well, honey, if you was once one of those people, then why are you taking advantage of these women? Why are you doing this? If you was one of those people, you should not be out here using your power, your leverage, okay, to boss other people around to get what you want out of it. Okay, because you know these women were desperate. They needed a place to stay. They didn't want to be homeless. So you use it to your advantage to get what you want. And I'm absolutely glad that it's coming down on you right at this moment. Because this kind of stuff needs to stop. It really needs to stop. I mean, it pisses me off talking about he was one of those people. Okay, you was one of those people, but look what you're doing to the people. No woman should have to go through that. They trying to get help. This pandemic has everywhere all messed up. And New York City right now is hurting really bad because the homeless is out there walking about. There's really no rooms for anybody. I even heard that some luxury hotels, nice hotels in downtown Brooklyn have, rooms to rent out to people who were homeless or trying to if they have the coronavirus, they need to go and, quarantine. But it also brings down the tourists, and it brings down people who want to stay there. Because with that happening also, a lot of these hotels have went down and the service is not as great as it used to be. So if anybody trying to go to New York City right now, you better get your hotel out in the city somewhere, because there's a few in downtown Brooklyn that, are servicing the homeless, but they're also saying that other stuff is going on as well. Okay. But it's crazy. It's crazy. I am so sorry these women had to go through that. It sucks. It really sucks that these women had to go through this. And I'm glad they spoke out, and they should speak out more, because he already settled with two people. $175,000 between the two. That's hush money. That's like, okay, I'm going to give you this, but you can't talk about it. Honey, y'all better, listen, blow the whistle. Blow the whistle. Y'all better blow the whistle on them. Keep talking about this, because this kind of stuff needs to be heard and brought to people's attention, that this stuff goes on. Okay, I have heard so many different stories of, women in the shelter system, how even security guards used to come on to them, and because they had some type of pull, if something happened in the shelter system, they can get them kicked out. It's all types of stuff. It's all types of things that be happening to those places. But these women shouldn't be taken advantage of. Well, anyway, that's all I have right now. I will talk to you guys later. Let me know in the comment section, have you ever heard of any misconduct in the shelter system? Have you even experienced it? Now, you don't have to answer that, but if you know somebody that has, what were their steps to getting help and everything like that? That's what I would like to know. So, you guys, I will talk to you later. Have a good one.